Hey folks, it's Glenn, and welcome to the Friday Night Think and Grow Society Hangout, or webinar, whatever we're calling this thing. I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and it looks like the summer months are starting to take their toll on the people that are disciplined enough to be here on a Friday night when it's still light out and they can enjoy the outside weather. So I'm going to forgive you for that because I know you can go back and watch the replay. But for those diehards out there like Jack Gates, good for you. In any event, we're going to be very quick and very focused tonight. The lesson for tonight, pleasing personality, is a very important one, but it's not very complicated. In fact, most of these lessons aren't very complicated. We complicate them, but they don't start off being complicated. Pleasing personality is actually one of my favorite lessons because it was one that I really had a tough time with in the beginning, especially because when I was younger in the practice of law, I was very, very ego-centered, and I was very, very focused on patting my own ego and feeding my own craving for appreciation. And so one of the things that I had to learn how to do was to humble myself and to understand the value that starting a relationship off with others, the value of doing several things, but the most significant of which Dr. Hill talked about in this lesson, was taking a sincere interest in others. And we're going to focus on that aspect. There were a lot of things that Dr. Hill talked about in this lesson, things about character, the way you dress, the way you carry yourself, but there's a lot of different things that go into your having a pleasing personality, but I don't think that there is one that is better for you to focus on and improve than being willing to take a sincere interest in other people before you expect for them to take an interest in you. And the reason I know that this lesson is important is because there have been so many other authors that have written or discussed it in some fashion or another. Andrew Carnegie, in How to Win Friends and Influence People, half of that book was things that you can do to signal to others that you are sincerely interested in them. And that's going to be, like I said, a recurring theme through a lot of different publications out here. So Dr. Hill shared it with you, Andrew Carnegie shared it with you, and there are a lot of other authors that talk about that. Now, here's the magic to this. Most people will hear what I talk about when I talk about taking an interest in other people, and they'll add that to a checklist of things to do. But the thing that makes this work is not that you're humoring them through idle chatter, but that you are truly interested in what they have an interest in themselves. You are taking a sincere interest in them. And what it means to be sincere, from my perspective, is that when you choose to engage in a conversation with someone, when you choose to reach out to them and offer them help, that it's always truly about your desire to help them and not gaining favor with them, not manipulating them into listening to you because you took an interest in them first. People will naturally take an interest in you when they feel that you are sincerely interested in them. And frankly, they won't take an interest in you before then. But the point is that it has to be sincere. There's a lot of people that will pretend to be interested in you because they're really just looking to get your attention. But when you're sincerely interested in someone else, you'll know that because the reward for that is the joy that that person experiences from whatever engagement they have with you. It's not a matter of you're on your best behavior with them until they give you what you want, which is, for them to take an interest in you or otherwise. So pleasing personality has more to be more about it than I'd say it's more about being of service to others in a way that doesn't require them to be of service to you, or being of service to others in a way that doesn't require them to buy anything from you, or being of service to them in a way that adds value to them without any expectation of immediate compensation from your perspective. Now, there are a lot of ways that you can do that, and we're going to talk about some of those ways in just a minute. But you first have to get your head around the concept, though, that things that you do should be done because they're the right things to do and not because it's going to immediately benefit you in some fashion. So I'm going to tell you a quick story about a situation that I had. Oh, man, this is going on many, many years ago now. I was coming back from Las Vegas, and I can't remember what it was I was there for. All I remember is that on the way home, I had the opportunity to sit next to a gentleman that was from Baltimore, and he happened to be a copier salesman. And I can't remember. I may have told this story. Again, we're on lesson 10 now, or 12, or whatever it is. Not lesson 10 in the book, but in our lesson chart, we're probably up to about a lesson 11 or 12 now. So I can't remember what some of these stories overlap, and some of them are helpful on a number of different points. But here's what this one was about. We were sitting on the airplane coming back from Las Vegas. This gentleman was a copier salesman. And we sat and talked the entire time that we came back on the trip. And at the end of our trip, we stood up and we shook hands, and the gentleman said to me, he said, "Glenn, I really appreciate the time you took to talk to me. It was really nice to find out more about you and about what you do, find out about your business." And I had to chuckle to myself because we had spent that entire conversation talking about his business. In fact, he called me back several days later to actually to acknowledge. He said, "Glenn, I just realized that I know virtually nothing about your business because we spent the entire time talking about me and what I do." And the point in that was that he enjoyed that conversation immensely because it was about him. It was about what he was interested in. It was about what was important to him. He was basically educating me on the copier industry and how the whole thing worked in his particular company, and how some of the products are made where they share different parts and things of that nature, but certain parts were different, and that's what distinguished them. There were certain things that were in common. I knew everything there was to know about selling copiers. I could have gone to work with him by the time we were done on that four-hour flight home. But here's my point. He felt like I was his new best friend because the entire conversation was sincerely about him. I was actually very interested in what he was telling me. He was telling me anything about copiers and scanners I didn't know. And I'm a technology geek, so I was very interested in finding out more. So I was simply sitting there asking him the right questions and truly taking an interest in what he did. And at the time, I don't even remember what it was that I was promoting. I think I may have been still practicing law back then, so I certainly wasn't trying to get him to become my client. I was just sincerely interested in what he had to share. But we became good friends because we ended up getting together after that and went for lunch and hung out. We actually ended up buying a scanner from him, one of the companies that I was coaching at the time. Now I do remember. I was actually working for a mortgage brokerage. I was working with a friend of mine who had out of law school who had formed a mortgage company, and we actually were in the market for a scanner at some point in time after I met Jim. But ultimately, before that happened, I actually was just sincerely interested in talking to the guy. But it actually translated into a sale for him, because I took an interest, talked with him long enough to find out what he did. And he actually provided excellent value to us and helped us in a lot of ways to get exactly what we needed. But my point to you is that a lot of us would have had that conversation just long enough to be able to interject and talk about what we do. And most of us are talking, we're listening just long enough for the other person's lips to stop moving so that we can share what we want to share. But ultimately, that's not what's sincere. Sincerity means that you ask questions that logically follow from the last thing the person said. If you are continuing the conversation in a logical way, then you're not simply waiting for your time to interject something or to change the subject to something that you want to share. Sometimes if you watch a talk show, the way that the guest is being interviewed, it's all about, what's next? Tell me more about that. What did you do next? What did you do after that? Why did you do it that way? That kind of conversation is what people enjoy and what they remember. And what they remember more than anything else is how much they enjoyed talking to you, even though it was about them. Now, there are a lot of things that go into having a pleasing personality, but I think that you will find that that single characteristic of taking a sincere interest in others is probably the single most important thing you can do to advance yourself as someone who has a pleasing personality. Let me give you another example of some things that you can do that create the aura of a pleasing personality. A lot of times when we're in public, go to events, we're at a networking event, socializing with others, people have a tendency to talk and discuss things, sometimes political in nature, sometimes other, whatever it might be. And they tend to get into debates with people. And when you get into a debate with someone in public, there's going to be a winner and a loser, or it's going to be a standoff. Now, if you are in a debate with someone in public, your winning the debate doesn't ingratiate you to the people who are observing the debate or to the person who lost. So you're in a no-win situation when you choose to debate something with somebody. If your goal is to one-up them and to appear to be smarter and superior to them through beating them into submission, it's kind of hard to then extend the hand and expect for them to be excited about being your friend. On the other hand, if you engage with them in a way where you're inquiring, you're asking the right questions and giving them a chance to share their opinion or share their position or whatever it might be without necessarily challenging it, that's another way for you to have a pleasing personality, because the worst that can happen when they walk away from that is they'll have to say, well, at least you took the time to understand my position. You may not agree with me, but I really felt that you sincerely took the time to understand where I'm coming from. And that's something that other people observing that conversation will feel too, because no one's asking you to agree with them. But if you can be respectful, even in the face of something you disagree with, people pick up on that, and especially the person that you may be talking with or talking to. So that's another way for you to develop an acumen for having a pleasing personality. Another way is that sometimes people are having a discussion with you, and you know that something they said is wrong. You know flat out that the information they just shared can't possibly be right. Well, you have two choices at that point. You can either bring that to their attention and do it in a way where they feel now that they have been put on the spot and feel the need to defend their position. Even though it may be indefensible, sometimes people feel the need to dig the hole deeper for themselves. Or you can simply allow that to slip by, or you can there are ways for you to bring it to their attention in a way that allows them to correct their error or maybe see their error without feeling like they were put on the spot or made to look silly because they made an error. Nobody gains by having their deficiencies brought to their attention in public. And so you don't want to be the person that's correct, especially when it's at the expense of somebody else who may have put their foot in their mouth over something. So in public discussion, always give people an opportunity to save face or to save their name by not calling them out because they were incorrect about something. There's always somebody that wants to be Mr. Know-It-All or Ms. Know-It-All at public events, networking events in particular. And they almost never find themselves surrounded by people who are excited to be there with them. So again, there are people that when you walk into a networking event, they brighten the room. Those are the people with pleasing personalities. And there are other people that when they arrive, they dim the room. Your goal in life is to be one of the people that brightens the room when you enter, not one of the people that dims it. And you can tell the people that brighten the room because those are the ones that have lots of people congregating around them. They're the ones that are usually making introductions, introducing people to each other, being a connector, as it were, as opposed to standing there pontificating about how great they are about what they did or what they're doing or something they told somebody or whatever it is. My point to you is that The best way for you to attract people is to find a way to humbly be of service to them. And when you have a conversation with someone that's engaging, when you have a conversation with someone that's about them, you're being of service to them. You're giving them an opportunity to be the spotlight. If you can take the spotlight off yourself enough to shine it onto someone else, you will make friends everywhere you go. So again, some of these are very, very simple ways to have a pleasing personality. Let me tell you one of the most powerful ways to have a pleasing personality. Let's say you're at a networking event or some other type of event where you met somebody new. Even on the like I was on the airplane, that was a good example. If based on what Jim had told me on the airplane, I came back to my office and based on the topic we were discussing, found an article that I thought would be interesting to him based on what he expressed as being a focus for him. Sharing that article with him and saying, hey, listen, I was listening to what you were saying about this, and I came across this article, and it sounds like exactly what you were saying. I thought I would share this with you. What that does is, A, it's a service, because if he really was interested in that subject, you just made it possible for him to get some information that he may not have been aware of. Sharing a book that you recommend for someone based on some discussion that you had is another way to do that. But more importantly, it tells that person that you were consciously and sincerely listening to them. And again, that's another one of those things that's so simple, it sometimes goes over our heads, that this is one of the keys to success. You know, if you look at pleasing personality, self-control, the habit of saving, the habit of doing more than paid for, none of these things individually is the secret sauce or the silver bullet. But success, as we talked about early on in this course, is doing a few simple things consistently. Success is doing a few simple things consistently. And it's the fact that none of these things are especially striking that allows the importance of doing them to go over some people's heads. Some people will look at this lesson on pleasing personality and say, oh, it can't be that easy. That can't be as important as they're talking about. But when you look at that principle of taking a sincere interest in others before you expect them to take an interest in you, and you really break it down to what that means on a daily basis. I talk with people in sales about making sure that they make a friend before they make a sale. Let people get to know you before they get to know your business. Have a human conversation with them. Have a conversation, not a presentation. See, people love to talk with each other, but they don't necessarily like for you to be a broadcast system pitching them on something that that they may or may not be interested in. Even if they're interested in it, sometimes they don't want to be sold. We all like to buy, but we don't necessarily like to be sold. So a lot of times we have a tendency in public or talking with people to be in presentation mode, where we're talking about ourselves or talking about something that's important to us or whatever it is. If we're dominating the conversation with our views or our position or something that's important to us, we're not giving the other person the opportunity to be part of the discussion. We're not giving them the opportunity to have the spotlight on them. That's a very selfish thing when you stop to think about it. It certainly doesn't create friendship for you to dominate a conversation in a way that doesn't allow the other person to have input into it. You know, it's like talking at people instead of talking with them. The best way to talk with people is to ask what they think, to ask questions that follow naturally from what they just told you about what they think, to find out why they feel that way, what's important to them about the position that they've taken. And frankly, if you're being sincere, you should want to know those things about them anyway. Don't ask questions just for the sake of asking them. That's another mistake that we make, is that people can tell when you're asking questions just to be polite. You should ask questions because you sincerely want to know the answer to them. That's what a conversation is all about. Now, here's the other beautiful thing about that. If you can develop the habit of having a pleasing personality, the traits and characteristics that go into having a pleasing personality, focused on taking a sincere interest in others, you'll actually learn a lot. a lot of these conversations that you're going to have, you will have underestimated the importance of what the information that's going to come out of them. When I got finished talking to Jim on the airplane, there was nothing I didn't know about a scanner or a copier. So the next person I talked to, I actually appeared to be knowledgeable about the subject, even though I didn't sell copiers. It made it easier for me to make a referral to someone I trusted to do a good job, because they felt like I really had offered value to them in my description to them of what they ought to be looking for in a copier. So in many instances, I had the copier sold by the time they got to Jim, just based on what I was able to tell them about what it is that they needed to focus on. And because I was not in the business of selling copiers, they didn't consider it a sales pitch. I was just being informational for them. In the process of being informational, I was actually building credibility with them. And they naturally, frankly, the conversation, were you ever in the copier business? No, but I bought a few that I used myself. I just thought I would share with you what I learned when and doing my due diligence on what's out there. Anytime you're in a position to shorten someone's learning curve by giving them information that keeps them from making, or help positions them to make good decisions for themselves, that's another way to take a sincere interest in them. The truth is that there are so many ways for you to take a sincere interest in others that if that's the only thing that you focused on was how to help other people get what they want. Zig Ziglar said this: if you help enough people get what they want, you can have everything you want. But it starts with you focusing on the needs of others before you focus on your own needs. There are times where it's appropriate for you to put your oxygen mask on first, but then there are times where it's more appropriate for you to reach across the aisle and help somebody else. So understanding when that's appropriate, understanding how to do that sincerely, that's where the magic is in all of this. This is why you can't just work off a mechanical checklist of things to do and think that you're going to be successful. You have to understand the importance of making these principles part of who you are at your core, and not just a checklist of things you did on the road to what you thought was achieving success. Remember, success is about doing a few simple things consistently, but I would also say it's about doing a few simple things sincerely. You should be doing them because it's the right thing to do, not just because it's going to yield success for you. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that you understand that it's not the mechanical application of these things that matters. It's the level to which you are able to make it part of your fiber, part of your being, part of your existence, part of who you are. Remember when we talked last week and probably in the early weeks of this course, when we talked about the four levels or four stages of learning: unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. When you make these things that we're talking about, pleasing personality, something that you become unconsciously competent at, it's just in your nature to care and take an interest in other people. It's not something that you have to practice or remind yourself to do. That's when you really will benefit from this particular principle. You've got to make these things unconscious competence goals for you, where it becomes so automatic for you that it's just part of who you are. And having a pleasing personality is not a difficult one to do. You simply have to make the commitment to take a sincere interest in others before you expect for them to take a sincere interest in you. Now, I will tell you, you'll make a lot of friends if you learn how to do this. You'll have a lot of people talking about you because they will enjoy conversations with you more. You'll have a lot of people looking to reciprocate, not because they felt obligated, but because they enjoyed the relationship with you so much that they want to do something for you as well. Now, you have to trust that that's the way it'll happen for you. But I can tell you that that is my mission every single day. When I come into this office, when I go to events, when I go to speak at speaking engagements, my goal is to find a way to help somebody in that room, preferably more than one person, by taking a sincere interest in what they have to say. And it's rare that I don't have the opportunity, or rare that I don't succeed at that. That's one of the reasons why I like when I go to speaking engagements. It gives me an opportunity to meet so many great people to have conversations with. If you're selective about the events you go to and who you spend time with, it's not hard to take an interest in other people. The truth is that there are so many interesting people out here that taking an interest in them is actually the easy part. But you've got to do it consciously in the beginning until you make it part of who you are. Now, let me see what Mia just said, but you don't have to start even if it runs down step, it will soon grow. Yeah, that's true, Mia. I mean, you know, this isn't something you're going to be perfect at overnight, especially if you have been through the course that I took where, as a lawyer, you know, we thought the world revolved around us. It takes time to unlearn that behavior. And it's painful when you've really made it, when you make ego part of who you are, it's very, very difficult to unlearn that behavior. But if you can unlearn it and replace it with taking an interest in others, you will find great success in attracting the right people to support the things that are important to you, attracting the right resources through the people that you know, and attracting the right opportunities that would never have come your way if you hadn't started off by creating an opportunity for someone else to feel good. And that's the bottom line. When you take a sincere interest in others, you create an opportunity for somebody else to feel good about themselves. And that's why a pleasing personality plays such an important role. People love to see you coming because they know you're going to make them feel good. So I would tell you to focus some time and attention on that. It's something that you should not allow to go over your head. Don't underestimate any of these lessons individually or collectively. It's amazing how simple this can be if you just take the time to understand that success doesn't have to be complicated. All right, so that's just about it for tonight's lesson. I hope that this was valuable to you. I hope you'll take it seriously. Our next lesson is on accurate thought. Accurate thought is going to be a very important lesson because this is the one lesson that people that seek to control you by manipulating you into thinking their way, by manipulating you through the media and otherwise, the one thing that is the antidote to propaganda and ideology and talking points and other types of manipulative ways that people deal with you is your ability to engage in accurate thought. So deliberate and accurate thought is a recurring theme throughout everything that we're going to do. One of my favorite authors, John Maxwell, wrote a book called Thinking for a Change. We talked about that one in the beginning, I know. Thinking for a change is one of the most important concepts you can grasp because so many of us fail to take the time to deliberately think, to engage in deliberate thought leadership. This is why mastermind groups are so important, because you're surrounding yourself with other people that are consciously and deliberately engaging in accurate thought, creative thought, but accurate thought as well. So be sure to take this next lesson very seriously. It's not a difficult lesson. None of these things are difficult, but see the full message in these things. Accurate thought is an empowerment tool that keeps you from being subject to naive, emotional-based inclinations. An accurate thinker doesn't allow emotion to overcome logic and deliberation. And logic and deliberation is what balances out your traditional emotional response to what's going on around you. So we'll talk more about that next week. I know that we're at the 8:30 mark here. I promised I would try to keep these lessons to 30 minutes or less, and I think I've done a pretty good job of that recently. I appreciate your coming out and joining us on a Friday night when you could be outside enjoying this fabulous weather that we're having through most of the country. But thank you for humoring me and keeping me company on a Friday night. I'm getting back out to work in this studio out here. We just got a bunch of new equipment in, and I'm having a fabulous time of restructuring the studio to upgrade ourselves to bring you Village Connector TV shortly. So thank you very much for bringing this together for me on a Friday night, joining us. I look forward to seeing you next week. Be sure to invite a few friends, and if you haven't set up your profile at Abundant Society, please do that ASAP. Remember, it's abundantsociety.net. Look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great holiday, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining me.